You're all in darkness. I'm not used to microphones. Can I try to hear that? I promise not to sing. Right. I spent ages working on these slides, hoping that it will distract you from the content. So just be impressed by the slides, okay? Well, and maybe maybe now we've got the slides there, almost. It's a great excitement and honour to be back here on the stage at the Royal Vauxhall Tavern. Next slide, please. Because I'm going to talk about what gets me up in the morning. That was the idea that when Ingo said to me, "But I can do one, what gets me up in the morning?" And, well, apart from morning wood and a coffee, I had to struggle to think. And I think it's the love of doing the work that I do, really. I've been running Pink Therapy pretty much single-handedly for a long time, for about 14 years. And I'm very committed to it. So I thought I'd try and share some of that enthusiasm with you. Next slide. So when I was last on this stage, I was with David Hoyle talking about dogging. And about half an hour before the show went on, I got a call, about an hour before, I got a call saying, could you go on the stage with David Hoyle tonight? And I'd been coming down to see the shows, our magazine, for a while. He's talking about dogging. Okay, I met this sex therapist, but I didn't really know anything about dogging. So I was on Wikipedia, on the phone, on the way here, looking up all about dogging, so that I could sit and try and appear to be somewhat sensible. Okay, next slide. But the very last talk I did was talking about the role of BDSM and fetish in sexual pleasure at the Royal Society of Medicine. And I'm the only person in history that's ever taken a GIMP onto the stage at the Royal Society of Medicine. In front of the president of the World Association of Sexual Health, who was quite in awe of the fact that I had a puppy on the stage with me. And this really is the puppy. He was the one. It kind of got bemused response from various sex therapists there. Some of them wanted to come up and pet him afterwards. Others thought that he looked a bit scary. I just don't really get the scary bit. He doesn't look at all scary to me. But somebody said to me, no, he looked terrifying. So, okay. So, there are no puppies at this show tonight. So I thought, well, I'm at the RVT. I don't need... Well, there are lots. There are probably quite a few here who will be gimps for me if I ask them to. But it's not necessary, is it, here? It's not necessary, because you've all seen a GIMP. So, we don't have to worry about that. But for them, they've never seen a GIMP. And that was quite a special moment for some of them. Okay, so, next slide. Right. Do we know where this is a still from? Wizard of Oz. So, who am I in this slide? Am I Dorothy? No. I have no ruby slippers on. I kind of use this analogy for Pink Therapy because I guess how many people have heard of Pink Therapy? Yeah, okay, so about half of you. I have a theory that Pink Therapy as an organisation is probably better known amongst the whatever crowd than it would be if I went into Compton's and said, hands up, who knows about Pink Therapy? We've got quite a big reputation, both nationally and internationally now, for leading psychology around working with gender and sexual diversity clients. And everybody thinks it's a big organisation. Somebody came and studied with me from Columbia 2 years ago, and he was writing to the director of the Pink Therapy Institute. And there's this idea that there's this big organisation at the Pink Therapy Institute, but actually it's pretty much me working 6 or 7 days a week 12-hour days, making it look like a big organisation. So I feel like I'm a bit like the Wizard of Oz, pulling all the levers in Neverland. Neverland? Oz. And that was a great one. Okay, and making it all happen. Right, okay, next one, please. But I delude myself a little bit because it's not entirely as it appears. There are other people helping me in pink therapy. So there's me, the big star at the top of the Christmas tree. We'll draw the analogies afterwards. I have a team of clinical associates, and they're really experienced therapists who all run their own practice and who help with the training. So some of them do the training with the trainers, and some of the trainers just come from outside to run the courses. But I don't really have any management responsibility over them, and they don't have any over me. We kind of are associated. So, but they're usually a very supportive group of people who help me think things through and make the organisation the kind of rich organisation that it is, because we've got therapists doing a whole range of different theoretical schools and different types of therapy, all working within the organisation. So that brings a great expertise and richness to it. And then I have an admin worker who's in a day a week and does a bit from home. I have someone who is a social media consultant and who helps with the web and Twitter and things like that. And I have someone who writes press releases who's just started this summer. A new graphic designer. We just did some research this summer, and the research was asking the question of gender and sexual diversities, and I'll talk about what that means in a minute. Where do you go when your relationship gets into distress? Who do you turn to? Because our thinking was that people don't go to mainstream counselling organisations, and if they do, they generally don't get understood. So we put a video up about that just recently. And then we have one volunteer at the moment. I'm looking for more. And we have a team of translators, and I'll talk about them in a minute because they're very important. Okay, next slide. So, 1981. I was trying to think what was iconic in 1981. It was a long time ago, but that was when I first started doing training in what was called in those days lesbians and gays, working with lesbians and gays. Because in 1981, the B word wasn't really being used, and then T wasn't even thought about, let alone any of the others. So it started, I was doing training on lesbians and gay men, working with lesbians and gay men in 1981, and then it became LGB. This is history. Pay attention. Then it became LGBT, and then it became LGB and T, because the T needed a bit of distance from it, because the T's are different to the LGBs, as you know. Then it became LGBTQ, and then the I's got missed out, so it became LGBTIQQA. Do you know what they stand for?
Yeah.
Somebody said no. That gives me a good cue to just say. So, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex, queer, questioning, and their allies.
Anything else?
But LGBTIQQA is still too short to cover all the other gender and sexual diversities. So we started talking about gender and sexual minorities, because if you're into BDSM and kink and you're heterosexual, you wouldn't be able to go to an LGBTIQQA agency to get your counselling if your relationship was in trouble. And you probably wouldn't want to go to Relate, because you'd be told that, spanking your partner is domestic violence, and that's not really approved of. So, then if you're asexual, you know what asexual is? No sexual desire at all. You might want intimacy, you might want closeness, but you just don't feel it down there, or you're not really interested in sex. Asexuals, again, you may be gay or straight and you're asexual, and again, if you're straight and asexual, you wouldn't be able to get any support from the LGBTQIQA community. So, I was talking about gender and sexual minorities for about 10 years, GSMs, and the students were saying to me, well, it's a really useful term because it is much more inclusive, and when you look at how frequent all those different things are, it's not really a minority anymore, is it? It's more because they probably outnumber the swans, as I call them, the kind of people who are heterosexually married for life and monogamous and never have sex with anybody else, because there aren't that many of the swans in the world. So they kept saying, well, you should just stop using the word minorities. So I tried to think of a new word, and around 2011 I decided, okay, 10 years of telling everyone to talk about GSMs, not LGBTIQA. I changed it to gender and sexual diversities. And we made a little video about this and put it on YouTube about 2 weeks ago. And it got taken up by the gay press, and it went viral. About 4,500 people have seen this video now. And people kind of misunderstood that. They thought we were just saying, Pink Therapy was saying we can't use the terms LGBT anymore and we should all be called GSDs. And that's rubbish, that's not what we're saying. But that was, and then, but if we start including the others, the GSDs, then heterosexuals will get included, as if the revolution stops with us and no one else should get any support. It was quite interesting. So I made a kind of response to that, and that's on the website, and only about 50 people have seen that on, and so watch it. Okay, next slide. So this was a little icon that a graphic designer drew to try to explain actually the whole range of GSDs that we use. So that kind of went on some publicity. It's not ideal as a graphic design really, because it's got females in dresses, but they could be trans. They could be trans women or cross dressers. It's open to interpretation. But it's trying to find a representation that can include and encompass asexuality and lesbians and poly and gay and lesbian, and those who are questioning or aren't quite sure, or who don't feel that they fit with all of those, because there's still quite a few of those around. Okay, thank you. Do you like that? Okay. This is where we get technical. Why are we saying, why am I pushing for the fact that we should have services for gender and sexual diversities rather than just LGBT only? And I'm saying that clinically, like that means sitting in front of people listening to their stories, I have noticed these core elements. All of the GSDs experience a hypervigilance or a feeling that they might be pathologized and thought of as mad, bad, or dangerous to know. So whether you're asexual, whether you're kinky, whether you're poly, whatever your other bits of your sexualities are, you're likely to be feeling that other people are going to be judging you for being mad, bad, or dangerous to know. And to some extent, you will have internalized a whole lot of negative messages and shame that get in the way of us just being ourselves and living the life that we feel that we need to live, and being our own beautiful creations. So all of those GSDs share those two things, and I think therapists need to understand that goes on, and then they need to learn about the individual social contexts that those different identities all live in. Because if you're a lesbian, you live a very different life to being a trans man, probably, and certainly to being a gay man. If you're kinky and you're straight, you live in a slightly different community and different world to an asexual. And so you can't just assume that you can work with one, you can work with more. You do need to learn about the social contexts and how that social context impacts on psychological functioning of the person that you're working with. So that's kind of the three core elements, and you'll be sitting an exam for this at the end of the lecture. So just make sure you've paid attention. Thank you. Next slide. Do you recognise these? Lolita. Lolita. Oh, that's an interesting. Oh, okay. maybe a lot of you wears them, but they're 3D glasses. And I use these in my training to try to draw an analogy for the therapists who are coming on courses, who are largely heterosexual, not entirely, but largely we get straight people coming, who want to understand, and I think that's really cool. So they view the world through one lens, their blue lens, if you like, a heteronormative lens. And everything that when they view my life as a gay man, it comes through that particular perspective. And what I'm encouraging them to do is to also think pink and look through the pink lens and try to see the world as I might see it. And so not just, and to set aside this for a little bit and look through the other. And if you can actually then look through both lenses at the same time, the whole world becomes 3D, and that's a bit more vivid and exciting and richer. So I thought I'd throw that slide in just to kind of explain the difference. Thank you. Okay, so why am I doing all of this? What's my mission statement in life? I want to make a difference, and I think when my first book came out in 1996, called the first Pink Therapy book, it was the first book in Europe that looked at working with LGB. At that point, 96, it was still LGB clients. By 2000, the next two books came out, and we were talking about LGBT or and-T. But I felt that had made such a significant impact, that first book, and it's still on the course reading lists for counselling courses around Britain, that I could die a happy man, and if I died, I'd kind of made a contribution, I'd done something useful. But the thing that kind of keeps me getting up in the morning is that there's a lot of other GSDs who aren't having quite as good a time as I as a gay man am now having, with all those kind of civil protections that I've got. And so I get up to challenge the hegemony of heteronormativity. I'm really interested, I like this phrase, cultural sensitivity. That's one of the big buzzwords of the diversity movement. So if you want to speak hip with your lecturers and therapists and the like, talk about cultural sensitivity, that they need to develop cultural sensitivity. Our website we spend a lot of time on increasing the knowledge base section of the website. There's no money in it for me to do it and to pay Lola to keep putting more information in there, except that I think it really is very important to put the knowledge out there, because where do we find out about ourselves nowadays? We find out about ourselves when through the internet, and then we realise we're not alone, and we start networking with others, or we read texts or reports or leaflets, and they tell us that actually it's perfectly normal to be feeling as fucked up as we feel. And so it's really valuable to have that knowledge on there. So those are the kinds of things. Fairness is quite an important motivator for me. I think that there's a lot of unfairness in the world. I think it's unfair that trans people don't get free independent psychological therapy. If they're at the GIC, they've got to jump through hoops, and they've got to tell the psychiatrist the right answers in order to get their treatment. But telling the right answers might not always be what they're feeling. And so having their therapy separate from a gatekeeper who's going to administer hormones or not, I think would be really useful. So I see quite a lot of trans clients because it's independent of all of that. I'm not involved in signing any prescriptions and doing any of that, and helping them kind of think through, do they want to go the whole way? Where do they want to go on this continuum? What's going to be right for them? Because it's just not fair. But of course, lots of trans people haven't got any money. So I'm a lot more flexible with my scales there than I am with my rich gay men who are coming to see me. But don't just inundate me with lots of people wanting therapy for free. I shouldn't have really said that. But lots of my colleagues do it as well. And that's a kind of underlying principle that's quite important. Okay, next slide. So what do we do? We've got this directory. We've got a directory on the website of over 200 to 300 people around the world Most of them in London. London has a lot of therapists wanting to work with gender and sexual diversities, and other parts of the country are less well covered. So there's a lot of competition for therapy in London, and there's lots of good therapists. I'm trying to include into the directory complementary therapists and be holistic. And if anybody knows a complementary therapist who's got good sales experience and wants to help us recruit more, then we could balance that up. Because if you're a trans man, for example, and you're binding, and then you have back problems, and you need to go and see an osteopath, where do you go? And how do you explain when they say, oh, would you like to just get undressed? That could be really tricky. If you've been stuck up on a St George's Cross having your back whipped for an evening, and your back's all lacerated, and you need to go and you've dislocated your shoulder or your rotator cuff, and you need to go and get a massage or get that fixed. And you go in and they, oh my God, look at that. So we need some queer-friendly complementary therapists. And they exist, we just need to find them. And so I want to make the directory much more relevant for all of us, really. Okay, and then we run these courses, and at the moment these are the things that we've got coming up. So we're running 2 one-year specialist diplomas for therapists. The new one is about relationship therapy, because that's the thing that we're really concerned about. Helping therapists learn more about all of the different types of relationships we have, because mostly they think of, if you go to relate, it's around a husband and a wife, or a man and a woman who are in a monogamous relationship, and that doesn't really reflect society anymore, because there are so many people who are poly or who are opening their relationships are in various ways, and so we're going to run a training course. And for the last 6 or 7 years, we've been running workshops around trans therapy for therapists. And this year, we've got an introduction, a kind of general introduction to working around trans and gender issues, and one on working with children and adolescents who are trans and their families. So that's pretty cool. This is the 4th year we've run a summer school, and we've had. So last year we had some really bright people coming who've been really experienced therapists who said, we want to go more, tell us more. So now we're doing a masterclass as well. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. I talked about the knowledge base, lots of books, translations project. This is something I'm really, really proud of. So let's have the next slide. Some time ago, I and Olivier, who does my admin, we collaborated on a chapter for a book, and then I updated a chapter. We collaborated on a chapter on gender and sexual diversity therapy, and I updated a chapter on sexual orientation. And he had a bright idea that we could get these books, he's Franco-Spanish, and we could translate these chapters into French and Spanish, and that would help get the message out there, because they're pretty major languages around the world. And I said, yeah, well, that's a good idea, but we've also had all these people coming on the summer schools, and maybe they would be interested in translating the chapters into their languages as well. And then I put it out on Facebook and asked around, and suddenly we were inundated with people offering to translate those 2 chapters, and then another one on BDSM, the one of my students has written, and one on reparative therapy, which is like pray the gay away therapy, which I've written. And we've suddenly got lots of a little international mental health library. So yesterday I sat down with this map and worked out the different languages and how much of the world, the different continents of the world, we're covering by having these foreign language translations, and it's pretty immense, really. I was amazed. And so these people just translated, some of them have done 4 papers, and it's not easy work, and they've just done it all for free. And we're still trying to get some of the Indian languages and Arabic into the library. So if you know people who can write those languages. Lots of people can speak them, but when you ask them, can you write them? I can't find anybody. So that would be good. But that's quite impressive, isn't it? I think. I'm really proud. Okay. And it was interesting, when it came to map, it just didn't have these other languages, so I had to add those on. Because they would have been part of the 17%, and I thought, no, they deserve to be counted. Swedish there. I'm not having that as part of the 17%. Blind. Someone told me that this map is not a politically correct right-on map, and we should have used a Peters map. So apologies for geologists and geographers in the room. We're about the same. And we'll use a different one next time. Okay, next. And so this is where we've had or will have people coming from for the summer school. So 4 years, over 4 years, we've had people coming from these parts of the world. And the little pink asterisks are because kind people in this country donated money to allow us to give bursaries to part subsidise those people coming on places. And I was really touched by how many therapy colleagues were saying, oh yeah, look, here's £100, I'll put it in the scholarship fund so that you can have someone come over from Serbia to study. That was pretty awesome. One woman gave us £200 just in a single donation. It's just humbling, really. And so that's been really exciting. We have a trans bursary on that as well to ensure that it's quite important that there's a trans presence. And so last year somebody came from America and he was about to start his training as a psychologist. And we were really pleased to have him. So there we are. Thank you. That's a picture of the people, as you probably gathered. We've produced these USB keys, and so if there are any people here who are psychology students or therapists, we've got loads of information that we've accrued from our library, and we can send you a key with lots of stuff on it. So see me afterwards. I haven't got them here, but I'll tell you about them. Okay, thank you. Next. I'm almost done. They were the books. So the first one in '96, and the second two came out in 2000. And we've become Amazon affiliates, so people can buy them online and then we can get money. Okay, thank you. Social media. I can't believe how much time I have to spend doing all of this shit. It just takes over your life, doesn't it? But we're on all of them, well, all of those. And now we're adding YouTubes, and we'll be putting a link from this probably as well. So it's changing the world. The message is getting out there. 4,500 people now have seen my face, and you. So it's good. It's good. And if you need to get hold of me, that's the email address, as good as any. Okay. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Dominic Davies.
Questions and answers.
Questions and answers, exactly. Who has some questions? Put your hands up. Are you going to, I know, because we're going to video, so.
I've got a good voice.
I'll go for it.
Dominic, I was really interested in how you organise your organisation, and I wanted to know where you get the money to fund, its structure.
There is no money. We get no grants. We're not a registered charity. I fund it basically out of my client fees or out of course fees. If the courses make a profit, then we put on more courses. If we offer bursaries to volunteers at London Friend to come on half-price places, because to sell up a few places at the end, that comes off the profits, really. It's just like, yeah.
So your administrator doesn't get paid, or?
Well, yeah, he gets paid. I pay him out of profits from the training, if we make any profit on the training. I used an image. Of Getty Images. I took off the internet. I didn't know it was a Getty image. They invisibly mark them. Do you know that?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. So I didn't steal the image. He stole the image. And it wasn't a very nice image afterwards, really. And then I got sent a bill for it. Not a bill to use the image, but to get it. It was a fortune I paid, but we were just settled. I'm not allowed to tell you how much we settled legally.
Ooh.
Tell us, go on and tell us.
No, it's being videoed.
Okay, I cover the ears.
Does anyone else have any questions? Oh, it is now. Thank you. Anyone?
Yeah, I have another question. Dominic. I really like this whole LGBTQTATIQ thing. And what's the I stand for again?
Intersex.
Thank you. And I wanted to know the years. So LNG was at 81, LGBT was 96.
Oh God, it's been a decade.
It's fluid, isn't it?
I've lost track. The Americans came up with this LGBTIQQA thing, you know. Of course they did. And I think they probably did it probably in the early 90s.
Okay.
I think it was probably early 90s when queer became acceptable to say, but for us. So late 80s, queer theory came around in the late 80s, but it was still a word that straight people couldn't use, but gay people could use. I had a straight colleague and she talked about my queer friends. And you're not allowed to say that. It's like the N-word. But then it became okay because there were departments of queer studies and so everyone was allowed to say queer, yeah? Right. There are more intersex people in the world than trans people, massively more. But most of us will have known a trans person, but not many of us will have known intersex people, which I think is interesting. There's not a political lobby or movement for intersex rights. There is, but it's a very quiet one.
What is intersex?
What is intersex?
Gosh.
What is intersex?
Wow.
What is intersex?
Intersex is somebody who's been born with the characteristics of both male and female. So maybe hermaphrodite's another term that might have been used. Well, I've got a friend in New Zealand who describes herself as hermaphrodite, but no, apparently that's not so politically correct. It's like a reclaimed term to use, hermaphrodite. Even the Intersex Society of North America, a woman who was involved in setting that up, changed the title a few years ago, and she wanted DSD to be used to replace intersex. And so we were all told it's now disorders of sex development as the proper term. Yeah, right. And then people were saying, no, disorders is not a good word to use.
Not a necessarily positive word.
And so it was differences in sex development was suggested. And that was okay, but they were still pushing for disorders. So then Milton Diamond, who's done a lot of work around this, said variations in sex development, VSD. And that was kind of almost taken. But I think intersex is still being used. And there are lots and lots of conditions, like 20 or 30 different conditions that you can be born with.
I used to work at Great Ormond Street and they have 11 gender definitions for newborns.
Okay.
And 1 in 200 newborns have anomalous genitalia.
Right,
So it's that
1 in 200 anomalous genitalia.
And
It's really
that's
common.
just external.
And they used to operate at birth and continue to operate to try to fix
Right
it.
there then.
And they thought that they were doing a good job for people because the first question people will get asked when you had a baby is, well, is it a boy or is it a girl? And if you can't say, well, it's a bit of both, or we don't know, or it's intersex, then that can feel the doctors thought the parents would feel a lot of shame at that, and so they wouldn't know how to handle it, so they thought, well, if they correct it, then it would be okay. And they would correct it based on the length of the penis. That was pretty much the only marker that was being used. So if you had if your penis was more than a centimetre, then you were going to be treated as a boy. And if your penis was under a centimetre long as a baby, then you would have your penis reduced because you couldn't have clitorises that were a centimetre long. So it would be reduced, and then they would start performing surgery to create vulvas and raise the child as a girl. And then they realised that people weren't quite, the surgery wasn't enough, because actually we have gender in our brains. And there was a very famous case of somebody who committed suicide because he was raised as a girl and had been born a boy. Some surgery went wrong on a circumcision and they burnt his penis off. So he was told, the parents were told, just raise him as a boy, he'll be as a girl, he'll be fine. And she wasn't fine. And then she found out that why she wasn't feeling right. And so she transitioned to being male, but had no penis, and ended up committing suicide, and it was all very tragic. So now they're trying to raise intersex kids into puberty, let them decide what they are at around 16 to 18. And there was a good film, XXY, did anybody see that?
Yeah.
South American film, amazing film.
Yeah, and at the film festival now it's also a very good film, and we're talking with them to take it here to bar whatever eventually, called Intersection. So
Oh, Intersections, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's the movie with my friend Manny from New Zealand.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's really cool.
Yeah. So
That's her second film that she's done, because she did a documentary for New Zealand TV that I've got on my computer, which is really good. We show it to our students.
cool.
Other questions?
Anyone else? Oh, that was very loud. Hello. Hello. You've talked about straight, sort of heteronormative psychiatrists treating people. How do you find that genderqueer and trans people get on in the professions, and that difference between how clients relate to somebody as a straight person and how clients relate to trans psychotherapists?
Okay.
Do you find that there's much of a I don't know, is there any help for people,
Right.
trans and genderqueer people, getting into those professions, and do you think there's still a lot of barriers?
I don't think there are direct barriers to obstructing them training. And one of my clinical associates, 18 months ago, we finally managed to appoint a trans woman psychotherapist as one of our clinical associates. And she's a very experienced psychotherapist, and was running the Gender Trust for many years, Shelley Bridgman. All the clinical associates are a bunch of people who are really supremely experienced and 10 years or plus of training and experience, and have written about their field and teach about it and everything. And there just weren't very many trans psych counsellors. And so there was one who worked for THT, and I've been trying to get her to join us, but she doesn't do any private work. And eventually I managed to persuade Shelley, and Shelley joined us, which was great. And there are, on our courses, we try to, on some of our courses, we try to ensure that there's a trans bursary, or to encourage trans people who are in training on counselling courses to get more training. And that seems really important to us to do that. So I feel quite pleased that we're making that kind of contribution. And I think that it's relatively, courses would be generally open-minded about trans people wanting to train. The difficulty is that trans people, by and large, are financially impoverished. For all sorts of reasons, there are barriers to them having money, and training as a counsellor nowadays is about £10,000 and no government grants. It's all you have to be self-funded, which is why it tends to be middle class white women who do it as a thing that gives them some meaning in their lives and makes them feel happier. And there's family income to do that. And why there aren't that many men training, because they're needed to earn a lot more money to keep a family going. And it's a very expensive thing. And so I think that disadvantages trans people in training, and disadvantages black people in going into training as well.
Hello, I want to ask you, what kind of your prediction for next few years? What kind of new streams coming into that kind of type of therapies? Obviously, it's appearing, this new one now is queer and all this transgender. But what kind of, can you predict what's going to happen in the next few years? What do you think?
Mystic Dominic. And the mists and the ball are clearing, I can start to see. I think we're going to get greater visibility of certain marginalised sexual orientations. There was a really interesting blog I read yesterday whether BDSM is a sexual orientation or not. I don't know what you think, but I'm pretty convinced it is. And I put the blog on my Facebook and to try and get more discussion about it. Asexuality is fairly quiet and that's emerging. I think that another new and emerging sexual orientation are trans-oriented men. And so I think, you know, we'll start to see more about that, and maybe trans-oriented people, not just trans-oriented men, but trans-oriented people who are preferring to only have relationships with trans people, even though they're cis. So I think we will see those, but I don't know what else. It's a melting pot and it's exciting and interesting.
Hey.
Marmol?
Yeah, hi. Practical question. How does somebody make an appointment with you? Do you do sliding scales?
Yeah, I have a huge sliding scale. Because I like working with a really wide variety of people, and the fees haven't gone up since 2008. So my scale starts at 55 and goes up to 120, depending on how rich you are. So I lived in Nottingham for many years, so it feels like it's the Robin Hood fee scale. And it goes low. It goes a bit lower than that for people who are in, you know, where I think I'm probably the best person and there's no one else, and I have to be a bit flexible. But my colleagues charge all sorts of different figures, so you can get me on this. And what I often do is I'll arrange an initial consultation and see someone and see if I feel I'm the right person, and if I am, take them on, and if I'm not, it's more important to me that I find the right person for somebody than I just fill my practice. So I often run with lots of gaps in my practice and send people out to someone else, because I think it's better to have a good fit between the therapist and the client, and that they get the kind of right kind of help, and I'm not the right person for everybody.
Hello. Yeah, I really enjoyed the talk. I'm not very political about what I am, because I've always been this way, and I hate the way the terms just keep changing, and I'm not sure what I am. And I just worry about this emphasis on terms, because I'm not even supposed to call myself a tranny anymore, because I think I am. And I think there's a huge danger in doing a lot of this stuff, and I think actually the emphasis should be on saying that no one is normal. I've never met even a normal straight person. They've all got sexual kinks and
Absolutely.
And
what is normal?
And you know, that's not to say that it's not important to fight for rights. I'm not saying that. There's a huge danger in making people feel that they're not kind of like everyone else, because everyone is kinky or whatever, in my view, and it's just that no one doesn't really want to admit it. Obviously I'm not. You know, I also feel there's a danger in being made to feel like a victim, and I don't. I wouldn't actually want to change. You know, it's not always been easy, but I wouldn't want to change. You know, I've enjoyed my life so far, and hopefully into the future. So my question is, you know, surely we shouldn't be talking about all these labels. You know, why are we talking about all these labels?
Okay, why are we talking about labels? I agree with you. A lot of the labels, which is why I try to simplify it and go for something that was a bit more inclusive, because, as you say, it's hard to find normal nowadays. And so pretty much everybody could say they fitted within the gender and sexual diversity. And I basically say, well, if you feel you identify within that label, and it's a very broad label, then you're welcome at P therapy. If you don't feel it applies to you, then go somewhere else, go to Relate or whoever else. But self-definition is really important. You know, if you want to call yourself a tranny, that's really important. I would defend your rights to that title. And if somebody else says, I don't like the fact that you're calling yourself a tranny, it's like, well, that's your problem. We should be able to call ourselves what we want.
Susie, actually.
Yeah, and beautiful, and human, and all the other things, all the other labels we might want for ourselves. But it is sometimes the way in which we want to mark ourselves as different. When I trained as a youth worker in the early 80s, that's how I got into all of this. And then it was very important that we had an LGBT youth group. Nowadays, I think lots of young people aren't bothered about meeting or identifying their sexuality and coming out. They're just who they are. And it's not that important to identify as lesbian or gay. And there's a kind of rainbow generation. And it's like, I am me. And I'll stick a label on me when I feel like it, but I'm not really too bothered about claiming a label. And clearly there are others who say, no, it's really important that I make a stance and I want to, my stand is to say that I'm lesbian or I'm gay or whatever it is. But when I talk to youth workers and to young people, it's like labels aren't that important for many of them. Yes, and that wasn't the case when I was a boy. And so I think there's a blurring of all of that now. I mean, trying to find true straight nowadays is quite difficult. There's lots of heteroflexibles. Yeah, and I think it's great. I love it. Speaking personally. Right, are we done? Because my drink's finished and
Oh.
And of course, Dominic Davies.